paint, superior durability, superior hiding, superior coverage, simply superior.
Hello there, it's Friday night. This is Ghana Tonight, and I'm Kevini Amano. Let's look at our top stories. Catch flights, but not in first class. President John Mahama imposes ban on all non-essential travels. Tonight, he says, if approved, modesty is the magic word. Ad hoc committee probing merely at vetting committee resumes sitting after unauthorized end to the last one. More than half a dozen witnesses testified. Council of State elections comes up as early as Tuesday across the country. Tonight, a look at how the vote takes shape in your locality. Oh, those are the big stories tonight. We'll also bring you that Democracy Hub protester story. They are now free as the current Attorney General has made moves to withdraw the case, citing a lack of evidence. But those are the big stories. Thank you so much for your company. Let's take a look at Ghana Brief now.
Government has imposed a non-essential travel ban on ministers of state in the quest to ensure modesty in government and save cost. Speaking at the swearing-in of 17 ministers of state, President John Mahama has also banned first-class travel for all his ministers, with a clear directive to them to clear all foreign travels with the Chief of Staff forthwith.
The resources that you'll be working with belong to the Ghanaian people who put us in office. Those resources are not to be wasted on opulence and extravagance. I've asked the Chief of Staff to write to all government appointees that have imposed a ban on non-essential travel forthwith to cut down expenditure. Any travel that is deemed essential and necessary must be cleared first with the Office of the Chief of Staff. And such travels will have to be undertaken in modesty, no first class. All traces of affluence and lavish lifestyle are to be avoided.
All eyes are fixed on the public hearings of the vetting committee chaos as leadership of the ad hoc committee trade allegations against each other. The majority have recused themselves from the committee, citing bias of basis while demanding a reconstitution of the membership of the committee.
We say that immediately the Speaker must reconstitute this committee by substituting the chairman, removing the chairman, Honorable Emmanuel Bejra, MP and chair of the ad hoc committee, investigating the allegations of disorderly conduct during the vetting of ministerial nominees.
Parliament was forced to suspend sitting today for lack of quorum. Per parliamentary standing orders, Parliament must have at least 1/3 of its members to constitute a quorum. However, after 40 minutes since sitting started, members in the chamber amounted to a little over 70. The minority has blamed the majority for its inability to gather its members to the chamber.
At the time I raised quorum, we were only 30 in the chamber. The so-called supermajority, 183 of them, including the 4 independent, making 187. There were only 14 in the chamber at the time I raised the quorum issue. And we were about more than 17 in the chamber. But after the business statement, Speaker made a roll call. when they tried to marshal all their numbers, including our numbers, they could only get 71. And that is the reason why we adjourned the House today.
The Ghana National Association of Teachers, NAT, has called on the Minister of Education, Haruna Idrisu, to ensure that the 20% deprived area allowance, as announced by the President, is captured and implemented next month. Thomas Musa Tanko is the General Secretary of NAT.
To the extent that the President has made a promise and has gone ahead to direct that the 20% to be paid, it is a good call and is to ensure that our brothers and sisters in those communities get the basic necessities of life to enable their sons and daughters to break the poverty cycle in those areas. And so we are hoping that once His Excellency has spoken, the next month budget that will be read, we want to see it inside.
Ghana Brief, therefore, you're still live here on Ghana Tonight. Be a part of the program. Interact with us as we stream live on Facebook, x.com, YouTube, and on 3news.com. If you'd like to comment, ask questions, use the hashtag Ghana Tonight. Coming up. If it's not necessary, then drop it. That's the approach President Mahama is bringing back with non-essential foreign travels among his appointees. Well, modesty is the word you're looking for tonight, especially if you're an appointee of the current administration. President John Dramani Mahama says if the foreign trip isn't essential, then, well, it's not essential. That's why he is ending trips that can be avoided. According to the president, his ministers will not be catching first-class flights too. At the swearing-in of 17 ministers of state, he said all trips abroad must be cleared by the chief of staff before they are taken.
I have no doubt that all of you are poised to work tirelessly to improve the lot of Ghanaians in your respective sector based on your experience and your competence. I must, however, remind you of the same caution I sounded to your colleagues who have already taken office, that the hallmark of this government will be modesty and respect for the Ghanaian people. There will be no room for arrogance and pomposity in this government. The resources that you'll be working with belong to the Ghanaian people who put us in office. Those resources are not to be wasted on opulence and extravagance. I've asked the Chief of Staff to write to all government appointees that I've imposed a ban on non-essential travel forthwith to cut down expenditure. Any travel that is deemed essential and necessary must be cleared first with the Office of the Chief of Staff, and such travels will have to be undertaken in modesty, no first class. All traces of affluence and lavish lifestyle are to be avoided. The people of Ghana are enduring difficult times occasioned by hardships resulting from the economic mismanagement of the last 8 years, and ours is to work to lift them out of this hole. Let me take this opportunity to remind you all that in the coming days, as promised in our 120-day plan, I'll be outdooring a code of conduct and standards for all government officials to guide the conduct of all our appointees. This will leave you in no doubt about what you can do and what you cannot do while serving in public office.
President John Dramani Mahama there. Now, after receiving the instrument of office, this is how some of the recently sworn-in ministers reacted, starting with Foreign Affairs Minister and leader of the oral team, Samuel Kujito Ablakwa.
I mean, this is an important suggestion, and I think that I mean, in the spirit of transparency, it will not be a bad idea at all. And I will expect that Parliament, because you recall that when we were in position, some of us really made sure that we focused on that, looking at how much we are losing to travels, frivolous expenditures, and how we are not prioritizing the use of our scarce resources. So periodic reporting will be critical.
Well, that is the president, and he has given his marching orders, and every appointee is supposed to oblige. And I think it is in order. Given our circumstances at the moment, I think that these are some of the measures to protect the public purse at this point in time.
Well, it's not a ban. I think it's restrictive travel, that only critical travel. So if sports demands that you have to travel, that's critical travel. Traveling. Yeah. Well, if you have to, you have to. You have to engage with the federations, you have to engage with the embassies both here and out to be able to draw in support for your country.
The way that the presidency works, he has vast power. He has vast resources at his disposal. There are always ways that the president uses to obtain information on happenings in the country. So I'm not sure that an appointee can go contrary to these rules and go scot-free without being detected. So there are adequate mechanisms in place to ensure and enforce compliance with these rules and regulations.
Now, this is not the first time the president is taking such an action. Back in 2015, he took a similar action to cut wasteful spending. 3 years after, his successor, Nana Dankwa Akufo-Addo, took that same step in 2018 with a temporary ban while exempting then Foreign Affairs Minister. So has this measure stood the test of time? And what are we talking about when we say first-class flights? Because there are many flights that leave this country that only have business class. And so how are we measuring this? Has it, like I asked earlier, has it stood the test of time? Entering the chat now is Dr. Alidu Bukari. He's a political science scientist. He's also senior political science lecturer at the Department of Political Science at the University of Development Studies. Doc, I appreciate you talking to us. Thank you so much for your time. But let's hit the nail right on the head. We've seen this before in the past two governments. Did it tackle wasteful spending the way we wanted it to?
Good evening to you, to your listeners, and thank you for having me. Yes, as you have just put it, this has not achieved the desired results. If it has achieved, I don't think the president will be reinventing the wheel. But be as it may show some level of modesty when it comes to wasteful expenditure in respect of these political appointees.
I see. And how important is that modesty for the John Mahama II government? Remember that he had introduced this in 2015. Nana Dankwa Akufo-Addo, the former president, also continued temporarily in 2018. And so what does this, modesty mean for John Mahama II?
Thank you very much. First of all, this is a measure of good governance and leadership, and it's an indication of political accountability to the people of Ghana. Don't forget that President Mahama is quite aware of Ghanaians' willingness to pass judgment on his governance for years to come. Ghanaians have just done that, and how not to govern today is an indication of poor leadership. And so that has just been passed on His Excellency Nana Addo and his appointees on just 2 months ago. And so for President coming out to restrict his appointees not to waste the little resources and then to engage the citizens of Ghana and to focus the reason for which he, Mahama, and his appointees have been elected to this country, to power, is to serve the people of this country and not to travel outside the country. Yes, your travel must be measured. Measurement in this case will reflect why you are going there and whether your travel will benefit Ghanaians and not you, the appointee. I think that is what he's trying to check.
Right.
And so the little resources will be reallocated to essential critical areas such as education, health, and infrastructure that we need so dearly in this country. And don't also forget, yes.
I'm glad you brought that up because, I intend to find out what is the criteria that should be used to determine what essential is in this case.
Exactly. So, I think if you listen to President's speech, Ghanaians today, just recently, he took over with power outages on our hand. That is very, very key area. Many rural communities don't have water to drink. We don't have, the university infrastructure is a problem. Health services delivery is a bane on our authorities. You just listen to what is happening across the globe. You will realize that President Trump has just restricted or withdraw all services U.S. rendering to countries in the south of the globe. So it's a wake-up call, and President is quite aware we have to take our destiny into our own hands. And one way to do that is to judiciously use the little resources that he has been handed over to, and then make sure that Ghanaians actually benefit from why we have elected him.
Right. So then there's also the conversation about, look, you may not be taking a first-class flight, but you may be going for business class, which is also quite, expensive. And so should we make public the modalities of deciding, whether we are going business class or whether we're going economy, if you get what I mean?
Yeah, that is where I don't even agree with the president on that statement, because ban or just restrict your appointees not to travel. Travel that has nothing to do with the office for who he or she is appointed into. So whether economy, as we said, economy or first class, it's an expenditure. Yeah, it comes at a cost to the taxpayer. So I think that he just needs to stay and say that, stay on and say that, if your travel is not to the benefit of the people of this country, the chief of staff should not allow you to travel.
Well, that's right.
Exactly. That is the point I'm making. I don't agree on him. With him saying that first class and all that kind of thing. All travel is travel. So why is the economy not expenditure? If somebody is traveling on the economy, is he not going to pay? Is he not going to pay?
Well, it sounds like it's a two-step measure. So first, the travel has to be essential, and then if you really have to go and approved by the chief of staff, then you're not going to go on a first-class trip or first-class flight.
That is understandable. If that is what he meant, I think I agree with him on that statement. Yes. So if your travel is very essential, then even when you are traveling or you are allowed to go, you should be on economy. That's okay. So I didn't listen to him very well. I think it's now clear to me. That's fine. But overall, I think that his position, is an indication of political accountability to the people of this country when appointees are put in the office to actually steer the affairs of this country and they are misusing it. I think this is a measure to check on them and to also let them engage the locals, especially the MPs that we have elected, who at the same time are ministers.
Very well.
And so, yes, you are elected to represent your people. Why don't you engage the people, stay in the country and then work for the people, the reason for which you have been elected into the office. So I think it's a wake-up call, and it's also a good, posture. Let me say it's a step of the president in the right direction. Indeed. To ensure that his appointees don't waste the little resources that they have come to meet.
Indeed, Doc, in the beginning you said that this has not really, stood the test of time when you compare with, the president in 2015, Nana Dankwa Akufo-Addo in 2018. What differently can, the president do at this time to ensure that, we realize the full benefits of this measure?
I think to balance out this, there must be a clear guidelines and modalities. There must be a clear guidelines and modalities. First, your travel must be, must benefit, or the reason must be very clear, whether the government, you are going on behalf of the people of this country. That's the first thing. Even if you are going on your own, what are you going to do? Are you going for professional development training or whatever? That all constitutes government anyway. government assigning you to go and learn some work, I mean, go and train and all that. I know that there are some courses that appointees will have to undergo.
Right.
So, yes, those modalities must be spelled out. As for those modalities, I think Ghanaians will agree with the president if those appointees
if they are properly spelled out.
Exactly. If appointee is traveled on that score, I think it's not a bad thing at all. So first that we have to spell out some modalities that will guide the appointees, even including the president. I have on the floor of Parliament, Minister, the elected now Minister of Foreign Affairs, he said that we need to have a conversation on presidential flight. Even the president himself,
right?
We need to have a conversation on it. Yeah. So starting from the president, I think is a very good leadership. So the example is more or less just showing, leadership by example.
Indeed, Doc, I'm out of time and we'll have to end our conversation, but I appreciate you talking to me. Dr. Gbenzuglo Ali Dubukari is Senior Political Science Lecturer at the University for Development Studies. He says it's a good move. The modalities must be clear, so we will benefit entirely from this measure, and it must include the presidential travels as well. Let's move on to something else now, because your town, well, could be headed for the new election for Council of State members. I bet you probably didn't know about that. One reason you should stay on for more. Now, candidates in the Council of State elections scheduled for Tuesday, February 11th, are getting ready for the contest that will elect one of the nation's highest level of advisors. The vote will take place in all 261 districts across the country. Now, questions are, what is the Council of State? What is their relevance in Ghana's democracy? Have they outlived their usefulness, which we'll discuss a little later? But let's see what we know so far about the Council of State. What does the Constitution say about the composition of the Council of State? It consists of the one person who has previously held the office of Chief Justice, one person who has previously held the office of Chief of Defense Staff of the Armed Forces of Ghana, one person who has previously held the office of Inspector General of Police. The President of the National House of Chiefs, one representative for each region of Ghana, elected in accordance with regulations made by the Electoral Commission and Article 51 of the 1992 Constitution by an electoral college comprising 2 representatives from each of the districts in the region nominated by the district assemblies in the region. Now, let's stay on this one because I should have mentioned earlier that the Constitution or the recomposition of the Council of State. Let's go back to that earlier slide. The reconstitution of the Council of State is in part by appointment and in part by election. And this last part is what we are discussing tonight. All the elections that will take place on February 11th across the country, in your region, maybe even in your locality. If you don't know about it, now you do. Let's take a look at the last slide. 11 other members appointed by the president. I think we've made that clear already. Now, how regional representatives are elected may be the question you're asking right now. So let's go through that real quick, right? The election of regional representatives is conducted by the Electoral Commission on the first past the post basis, which is basically how our elections are organized here in the country with the exception of the presidential election. Election of the Council of State is not open to the general voting public, but through an electoral college made up of 2 representatives nominated by each district assembly within the region. Self-explanatory, I'll move on real quick, but the question we all keep asking, what at all do these members of the Council of State do? They counsel the president in the performance of his functions. They are an advisory body. And if you were listening to me from the beginning, I said one of the highest levels, right, we have in the country enshrined in the Constitution. Let's go across the regions now and see how your locality is shaping up according to, as far as this election is concerned. Let's start off with the Upper East region. Castro Senyala has been keeping an eye out for us. Castro, Tell us what's going on. What's happening with the elections there? Any interest in it at all?
Yes, Kemini, good evening to you. Yes, there's so much interest here in the Upper East region. I can report that we have 9 people in the king contests, and we have 2 paramount chiefs among these 9 individuals. I understand that campaign is vigorously ongoing because we have 30 people making up the electoral college here in the Upper East region, 2 from each of the districts, the 15 districts actually. And so it's expected that next week the vote will take place. And we understand that though there isn't much clarity, but previous ones have been held at the Regional House of Chiefs in the Bolgatanga municipality. And so the expectations is that this year's own too will be held there. And so on that day, TV3 as always will be there to bring viewers up to speed with what's happening.
I see. Let's talk about the interest amongst people in the region. Are they even aware that this is going on? What is the interest level?
Committee, the interest level is not as much as compared to general elections, where even the atmosphere is usually very tense. This one appears to be very calm. People have interests because they understand what or the role they will be playing if these people are elected. And so the interest is there, except that it's not as much as it is whenever it's time for general elections or even assembly level elections. People get the understanding that, yes, because this doesn't involve everyone, just a select few are supposed to go and do the elections. They don't really bother themselves. But then they are on the lookout for, the outcome of it. And the interest is usually high, especially when polls end and the election, the results are being collated and to be declared.
I see Castro, we'll leave it here. Thank you so much for talking to us. Castro Sanyala is our Upper East region correspondent. We'll head straight to the Volta region. Faisal Abdul-Idrisu is our man there. Faisal, how is it shaping up?
The Council of State elections in the Volta region in the past, they didn't have the kind of interest and traction I am saying this time around. This time around, you have aspirants moving across the districts every single day, engaging just 2 persons in each of the areas, because for the 18 districts and municipalities in the region, 2 persons are to come from these areas to hold on Tuesday for the election. So the Electoral College has some 32 persons who will be taking part in the election on Tuesday. And like I mentioned, the interest is very high, particularly among NDC members who tell you that the previous Council of State elections, they allowed things to go and they never bothered about it. But now, as far as they are concerned, they have a government that is bent on resetting Ghana. And so they expect that whoever represents the Volta region on the Council of State must be somebody who represents the voice of the region as far as development is concerned. And so when you listen to some of that friends, they keep speaking about development of the Volta region, job creation, youth this, youth that. And so the focus is now more on the issue of the development of the Volta region, far more than the advisory role the Council of State is supposed to play. I've been engaging some of the aspirants. I think we should listen to them first before we proceed with the conversation. Very
well, Faisal, thank you so much for the reporting. We'll take a listen to those aspirants in a bit, but let's turn attention to the central region. Akwesi Ado is there for Akwesi. Same interest in the central region, you'd say? Oh, Akwesi Ado cannot hear us. Perhaps it's a good time to listen to one of those aspirants quickly, and then we'll move on with our interview.
So far, with the various appointments that His Excellency the President is making, about 60–70% so far are young people. That clearly states the fact that it's misplaced for people to say that the Council of State is not meant for young people, not at all. Recently, the President, I think overseas recently, said something about youth policy, that look, it is high time, young as we are part of what? Government policies when it comes to brokering of solutions and what have you. And over the years, just like I keep saying, I have worked in so many portfolios, I have helped government policies on so many levels, right from the days of Ministry of Transport to Ministry of Food and Agriculture and Interior. I have gained a lot of experience in that regard. And I feel representing Volta region on the Council of State, I'll be able to also offer those.
A candidate in the February 11th elections. Now, last month, advocacy group Democracy Hub hinted it will field some candidates. Let's get the latest and more on this. Well, before then, Oliver, kindly hold the connection for me. I'll turn attention to Akwesi Addo now. He's a Central Region correspondent. Akwesi, we lost you earlier, but I was asking whether or not the interest is as peaked as it is in the Volta region.
So this is the Central Region. And let me say that the stakes are a bit high here in the Central Region because we have a total of about 10 candidates seeking to represent the Central Region so far as the Council of State election is concerned. But let me say that within the rank and file of the National Democratic Congress, there's been a back and forth issues in the sense that some regional executives a few days ago did announce that the party was voting for Nana Obukwaka the 10th, who is the Gumwa District chief, and that they were expecting that everyone would vote for that particular person. But then we had a statement that was issued by Felix Okusipati, who is the acting spokesperson for government, announcing that the presidency has nothing to do with this particular elections to talk about supporting a particular candidate. And so that narrative, which was being peddled by some NDC executives in the Central Region, and that they were supporting Nana Obukwaka, was not sanctioned by the presidency. And so he announced in his statement that the presidency was leaving the chances open for everyone who had any sort of interest to, take part in this.
Very well, Kwesi. I appreciate you talking to us. We'll leave it here for now. We can now bring in Oliver Vomawo, who is constitutional rights and policy advocacy strategist for Democracy Hub. Remember, I was telling you earlier that Democracy Hub last month told us that it will field some, candidates in the Council of State elections. So, Oliver, quickly tell us what's changed since you made the announcement to field candidates.
After going through the process of vetting and going through the number of people who have expressed interest, we have decided to back one candidate, Church of Satengle, for the Volta region Council of State elections. We are reaching out to and canvassing for votes, and we're very interested in the process and hoping that we're able to get a person elected to the Council of State.
Very well. Now, elaborate on Democracy Hub's position about the lack of efficiency of the status quo.
Yeah, of course. One of the things that we have consistently talked about is the need to revisit some of the institutional framework that our Constitution puts in place in terms of our governance, culture, and also the mechanisms by which we intend to hold our democracy accountable. We have called in that regard as part of broader reforms for the abolishment of the Council of State, mainly because of its confused character, the fact that so many decisions of the Supreme Court have rendered the Council of State itself unuseful, if not useless to our democracy. And we think that that is what the constitutional reform should ensure. So some people might wonder, why then are we contesting the Council of State election? One of the reasons why we want to do this, a lot of people have questioned why, having called for the abolishment of the Council of State, we are contesting these elections. In fact, one of the things we are trying to be doing a lot more, even from now and ongoing, is ability to engage with the system strategically. Now, we know that constitutional reforms, and everybody knows, has been the biggest call of Democracy Hub. But the Council of State, despite its lack of utility, is one of the key institutions that can become a roadblock and stampede the process. And so we think that that space needs to be occupied to ensure that persons who believe in the need for constitutional reform are able to use it to translate and ensure that the process goes forward.
Right.
If we leave it as it currently stands, it is very unlikely that the Council of State as it exists would be willing to delete itself as part of constitutional reform.
I mean, you say it has become an obstacle. In what ways?
You have to look at the Council of State in two ways. And one of the things that we need to think about is, one, its participation in what we call the wage apartheid that exists under the current constitution. So if you recall, Toby Afede in the last time talked about how he had barely attended 4 meetings and he was paid half a million Ghana cedis for attending barely 4 meetings, right? Whereas teachers and vast majority of public servants spend 30 years in public sector and go home with less than 30,000 in pension remuneration. That in itself is unethical and inequitable. Secondly, we have put in place a framework which, in the way in which the framers contemplated, was supposed to be at some check on the presidency. It has not been able to play that role, and it's in fact not given the due respect to play that role. You don't have to look far for the evidence. The president now has made several appointments which by law were supposed to be made with in consultation with the Council of State. In fact, everybody now assumes and agrees that the Council of State's role is to rubber stamp the presidency. In that case, it's a drain of our resources, and then it is in fact giving us a semblance of there being a process to check the Western forces of the president, and it's not happening. Thirdly, its role is to give advice to the president. Now, the Supreme Court has told us that in no way is the president bound by any advice or anything that the Council of State says. And so, in effect, its existence itself has been undermined by the fact that there's no role and utility for that. In that case, then it becomes a mechanism for siphoning of money and then appointing a way to be a reward system for persons that the president feels that he wants to reward and appoint them into that institution. So we are saying that rather than have such Trojan horses or white elephants that we think are incorporated into the accountability framework of our constitution, let's take them out and rethink about what are the mechanisms by which we can ensure accountability of key constitutional actors. That way is more reflective rather than doubling up and creating institutions which we know are not doing that. But we just tell ourselves it's just for no reason.
Oliver, now efforts are underway to review the Constitution. Should we get rid of that system of Council of State?
That's what we are recommending, and that's why we are contesting these elections, to ensure that, in fact, it's gotten rid of. But also importantly, the constitutional framework requires, in terms of amendments, either we go for a referendum on the entrenched provisions or it goes through Parliament. Both of them, the bill that has been introduced to amend the Constitution goes through the Council of State. And so they can filibuster the process and stop these bills from going forward, unless public pressure is brought to bear on them to ensure that they don't then insert themselves and maintain themselves to the detriment of what governments are calling for. There's some indication that there's a broad consensus around this lack of utility, but a lot of the time, some of the things that happens in these reform conversations is that these institutions are like to hijack the process, and everybody lose their courage to be able to say that, well, even though you are in the room, you got to go, and that's what we're calling for, and we're hoping it happens.
Oliver, hold on for me. We're not done yet. I do want us to talk about the lawsuit that has been dropped against you and 32 others. If you didn't know, all 33 Democracy Hub protesters are now free after Attorney General Dr. Dominic Ayine filed to discontinue the lawsuit. That's coming up now. Let's get into that. Oliver Barker-Vomawo and 32 other Democracy Hub protesters are now free after the Attorney General filed to terminate legal action against the protesters who had been facing varied charges after an anti-Galamsey demonstration. Let's take a look at how the case has traveled over the months. Now, Oliver himself was charged with unlawful damage, offensive conduct conducive to the breach of peace, assault on a public officer, defacement of public property, theft, which was later dropped. And charges against the other protesters include conspiracy to commit a crime, specifically unlawful assembly, causing unlawful damage, offensive conduct conducive to a breach of peace, assault on a public officer, and defacement of public property. Now, this all began September 21st to 23rd, 2024, when Democracy Hub began their protest. It was a 3-day protest at the 37 intersection in Accra against illegal mining. Now, the police arrested 42 protesters on the final day for obstructing traffic and damaging property. And then Oliver was declared wanted. He was later arrested for allegedly leading road blockades and inciting disorder on September 23rd. Well, the police detained him because he turned himself in. October 7, 2024, the Accra High Court then granted bail to 21 protesters, but denied Bakavomawo bail at the time because he had a separate case of high treason against him in another court. You know, that was one of the reasons the judge had given at the time. October 8, 2024, an additional 31 protesters were granted bail, bringing the total number of released protesters to 52 out of 53, the last being Oliver Bakavomawo. The Accra Circuit Court scheduled a case management conference to review the charges and plan further legal proceedings. I don't know what's happening with that, but we can go on to the connection now and continue the conversation with Oliver. Oliver, now there is no case against you as far as this Democracy Hub demonstration and, you know, the charges leveled against all of you are concerned. But how does this come to you, the fact that the case has now been dropped?
No, I don't completely agree. I mean, the Attorney General in his comments mentioned clearly that he had reviewed these cases and they found them legally untenable and unwarranted, admitting then that this is state-level persecution. Now, if the person is being persecuted, we don't say, well, let the state continue to persecute, and then let the same judges who have lacked the courage to be able to stand up and face up their own shame to go through a process where we believe that some justice at the end comes of it. The true justice is that the charges should not have been brought. The true justice is that the state should be having conversation around compensating individuals who have been so affected. That is the true way in which we reform, not just to play up the charade of this process and say, oh, well, somehow a person will be redeemed at the end of the day. Let's not forget, these are individuals who are innocent, innocents whose life have been dragged through the mud, persons whose life had to be stopped, who have to engage lawyers to be able to represent them, persons who have to almost every other week be in court. So this is not a process which is a fanfare, right? It is disruptive of one's life. Remember, I had come into the country in 2022 on the invitation of some members to give a talk on extrajudicial killings in the country, and then was arrested at the airport and tortured. Was recently tortured as well in jail. These are not things which we must take lightly. So there's a process that has been put in place, and it's a recognition that the state has failed its citizens. That is the beginning of a conversation, not the end. But I don't think that the redemption must come from judges who in the past have lacked the courage to do what is proper, and then we say, let's wait for them and let people continue to drag their life.
Oliver, your case is part of a long list of others. Should we be asking questions about why this government finds them frivolous and the reason is dropping those cases?
We should ask those questions. I hope that scrutiny takes us to scrutinize the former regime and the ways in which activists and various individuals were being persecuted. That's a useful conversation to have. How did the state end up in this situation as well, you know? And I think these are not, you know, that's why we are saying that these are not things we sweep under the carpet. We want to have those conversations and engage them squarely, because we don't want this thing to continue to happen and happen to somebody else. You know, people's lives are affected. So it's not even the flip side, it's the proper side to ask these questions and ask them rigorously. And I hope that we are ready for that scrutiny, particularly in ways in which we haven't done with the former administration in many ways. People have talked about, journalists have talked about, you know, fear of persecutions, self-censoring. We know very well that, you know, our rankings on press freedom went down. So I don't, you know, take it for granted that there's so many people even within the media space who lost their voice in speaking up against the former administration. Well, if they have found it so and they want to question this, I hope that they question it in a 360 manner. That will then lead them to a conclusion whether or not the Attorney General, now having reviewed some of the ways in which citizens have been persecuted, makes proper amends for that. I hope that the true call is in that regard.
Will you seek recompense?
There can be no true recompense for some of the things that have happened to me and to so many other individuals. You know, a sorry would not cut it. Not even money would cut it. At some point, one has to be able to leave that to posterity and say to ourselves, may posterity be the best guide and may posterity make us whole. But there's a need for the state to have a proper conversation that disciplines not only some of the individuals that were involved in this. It wasn't only the former Attorney General, Godfrey Dame, who was involved in witness tampering and all kinds of things in persecuting. There are collaborators in the civil service and the public services that allow this to happen. Those people continue to remain in place. And if these are individuals that lack the moral courage to speak up and allow themselves to be used, these are things that we must scrutinize. Again, our interest always must be on how do we prevent this from happening. So it's not just, even though as we seek to make it right by individuals, we must make it right by our democracy. That conversation we are interested in having.
We ended tonight. Will you continue to keep the government on its toes after it's withdrawn this case against you?
There can be no true recompense for some of the things. I mean, let's be clear. One, that let me answer this in many ways. One, that it sort of offends justice to think that the only way in which one has to be able to speak up against to demand what's right and held to treason, felony charges, and treason charges, which include a life penalty, or even the death penalty. You know, I think that there's some moral repugnancy even in that to entertain that idea. Now, I spoke up and have continued to speak up even against in the face of continuous injustice and brutality by the former regime. That is my charge. It is not an individual's job to keep our democracy on its proper rails. We must all be engaged in the process. And so if our thinking is that, well, this person then has seen some form of recompense, it's perhaps we are seeing this as if some favor has been done me, rather than some injustice that the state must begin to correct. Now, we all have a responsibility to ensure that this is a democracy.
Connection there.
So to everybody else demanding that we all take up on the road as guardians of our life is not promised to anybody. That there's not a vacuum in terms of how we speak up and hold the government to account. That tomorrow another person then who is speaking up, that the cost of us active citizenship will not be so high. So I'm not interested in persons who will be interested in the superficial, viewing this as some sort of favor or some big payout, cash out for whatever that may be. We must reflect on this as a moment not to rejoice, but as a moment to be sad about what happens to ordinary citizens when they speak up,
Well, now, what should this government do differently, Oliver?
Democracy is loud. Democracy is boys who speak up against those whose charge has been given, who the Republic has been given into their charge to steward it. Democracy asks questions. Democracy scrutinizes. And if anybody is uncomfortable with the scrutiny that democracy entrenches, that person ought not to be in public service. That person does not deserve any place in a country that wants to be committed to the rule of law. Now, a lot of these people have come into government telling Ghanaians that they want to be different. I haven't seen so much of a fourth republic that is committed to truth and justice. I've seen so many administrations go and come, and I've seen the same things repeated over and over again. If you're asking, I continue to remain a cynic. I continue to remain unbelieving of the words of persons who can do so much harm and have no apology for, and there's no accountability and there's no repercussions for persons who compromise or corrupt the public space in that manner. I don't want to continue to trust on people's words only. I want to see our institutions function. Our institutions demand that persons of courage man them. Our institutions require that persons who have the moral conviction or the courage of the moral conviction to stand up and speak up in the face of things. This government is also going to go astray. Unless it's the people across board who are coming into government believe in this ethic, that we cannot run a democracy with persons who do not believe in the democratic ethic, this government is going to go astray. So I want to be hopeful, but I want to be more than anything, I want to be given a reason to hope and not to expect that we trust based on nothing. So it's a beginning of a gesture. Let's be frank, it's exactly 1 month since the president took the oath. Challenges are going to come. We know that there are persons who have not reformed their behavior towards the public coffers, towards
Oliver,
how they view others when power corrupts, as we know history has told us that. So the only way in which we can ensure this, and my conversation and my expectations, is more on the people of Ghana rather than a government.
Indeed. Oliver, we'll leave our conversation here. I appreciate you talking to us. Oliver Baka Vomawo there. Now, coming up, at least half a dozen witnesses have come before the ad hoc committee probing the shameful melee among members of the appointments committee. There's more right now. Tonight, all eyes are fixed on the public hearings of the vetting committee case as leadership are starting to point fingers at each other. The minority have recused themselves from the committee, citing bias as basis while demanding a reconstitution of the membership of the committee. Let's take a look at what they have been saying so far.
I have written a memo to Mr. Speaker as part of the due process that I want to follow, but it is unacceptable that there will be live telecasts of events that Mr. Speaker has directed, that it shouldn't be a public hearing. And I emphasize this because those were the orders of Mr. Speaker. The audiovisual can be procured. I procured it. We can check it. That is exactly what Mr. Speaker says. So I don't understand why there is this public hearing.
We say that immediately the Speaker must reconstitute this committee by substituting the chairman, removing the chairman, Honorable Emmanuel Bejra, MP and chair of the ad hoc committee, investigating the allegations of disorderly conduct during the vetting of ministerial nominees.
That shows the hypocrisy of our colleagues, because if Honorable Abena was with us yesterday and today they are singing different tune, the best judge are Ghanaians. One of them, actually, who now you are alleging that he has had a press conference, was with us here. He even asked questions, and today he's same person. How best will I describe the person if he can tell us? Yesterday he called me. I saw the call whilst we're engaging that he would not be able to make it. And then all of a sudden, without talking to me, you went on air that I've been biased. Our constitutional mandate, as well as that of our standing orders, whether they appear here or not, we'll continue with our work. We'll show the entirety of the videos and what really happened here. And if we call your name, you're not here, we'll show what you did and what they did. And Ghanaians will be the best judge if our report was right or not.
Now that's a chairman who's made up his mind to do his job. But we'll stay in Parliament because tonight we have one more reason to worry about how we are represented in this government, particularly the legislature. Of the 276 MPs, only a little over 70 reported to work. Indeed, 71 of them reported to work today. For more than 40 minutes, all members could do was wait. When it was clear there will be no quorum, the required 92 members to sit for the House to do its work, they decided to adjourn. If you went to work today and it's a funky Friday night and I'm working, why didn't our MPs report to do their job? The job we pay them for. Perhaps you may say it could be because some of them are MPs or some of our MPs are now ministers. So let's do the math. How about that? How many of our MPs are ministers? Let's take a look at that now. Of the 56 appointments that have been made, we have a total substantive ministers of 43, total deputy ministers of 13, and 42 have been vetted. I'm not sure if this is what I wanted to show you, but approved by Parliament, there are 42 of them. 42 have been sworn in today. Remember, earlier today, 17 of them were sworn in. We have 14 more to be sworn in. At last check, we only have 25 of the number, the 56, or rather, of the 42, 25 of the 42 as MPs. When you take that out of the 276, we don't expect that 71 MPs will show up for work. So where are our MPs? Why are they not going to work? Perhaps you should give your MP a call and ask, why are you not working? Why are you not going to Parliament? Why are you not sitting? Someone is just drawing my attention. We should also take out those who were sitting at the committee that was hearing the case, the ad hoc committee. But those will probably be about a dozen. And so even if we take that out of the 276, minus that dozen, minus that 25, we're looking at under 40. Why are the MPs not there in their numbers? It's February 7th, exactly a month after they have started their work officially in Parliament, and we still have this. We don't even have quorum. What are we talking about? The minority seems to have some ideas.
You know, today we adjourned early because there was issues of quorum. I raised the issue of quorum under Order 64.1 and Article 102 of the 1992 Constitution, where we need at least 91 members to commence business. So after prayers, I saw that and I drew the Speaker's attention to it. At the time I raised quorum, we were only 30 in the chamber. The so-called supermajority, 183 of them, including the 4 independent, making 187. There were only 14 in the chamber at the time I raised the quorum issue. And we were about more than 17 in the chamber. But after the business statement, Speaker made a roll call. When they tried to marshal all their numbers, including our numbers, they could only get 71. And that is the reason why we adjourned the House today. This is a clear indication that the supermajority that they are talking about, they are not ready to do business and they have no government business to do. If they were serious with the numbers that they have, they would have been able to bring at least 91. If you are 183 plus independent making 187, it shouldn't be any difficulty at all bringing 91 into the chamber to commence business. This is a clear indication how weak the NDC majority are.
The minority there, blaming the majority for the lack of quorum because they showed up in their numbers. And, listen, when we look at the videos from Parliament, the truth of the matter is it's not just the majority MPs who are not showing up. Members of the minority are also not showing up. But the minority appears to show up much more than the majority side. Why are our MPs not going to work? How is it impacting our process of governance? I'll tell you more when we come back. Don't go away.
One bucket of Flamingo paint is equal to several buckets of any other paint brand on the market. Flamingo paint, superior durability, superior hiding, superior coverage. Flamingo paint, simply superior. One bucket of Flamingo paint is equal to several buckets of any other paint brand on the market. Flamingo paint, superior durability, superior hiding, superior coverage. Flamingo paint, simply superior.
Step up with DSTV and we'll show up by giving you more incredible entertainment.
Going to have a little fun.
Upgrade your subscription between the 13th of January and the 31st of March and get an even higher package for a whole month on us.
Buckle up, here we go.
There's nothing better than putting a little bit in but getting a lot out.
Time to boost some office morale. Incredible!
If you want to build a future, you gotta know what you want.
Step up and we'll show up on your home of entertainment. DSTV.
Well, the issue of absenteeism in the first month of the 9th Parliament was taken to the Parliamentary Network for Africa Executive Director Sami Obing. This is what he had to say earlier on News 360.
For a new parliament that is just less than 1 month old,
it's problematic if we are beginning to have quorum conversations, if we're beginning to have conversations around disturbances with respect to members of parliament's behavior, if we're beginning to have issues around, cooperation in the House and what have you. But this is an institution that has a bunch of politicians, and in this whole game of politics, sometimes these things are expected, to happen. But the extent to which these things affect the general work of the institution of Parliament, including the reputation that people place on the institution of Parliament, is what needs to be looked at. Now, on the quorum matter, for a Parliament that is just less than 1 month old, I expect that, the various leaders of the caucuses, including the whips, will be getting their numbers in. One will argue that usually on Fridays, Parliament is slow because members of Parliament will be preparing to move into their constituency. That can best be described as flimsy excuses from the leaders of the various caucuses.
Samir Obey is Executive Director of Parliamentary Network for Africa. Please call your MP. Ask them if they are going to work for you, if they are going to represent you in Parliament. Maybe they are representing you elsewhere because, as we very well know, the work is not only in Parliament. But please show up to work. We are showing up to work and paying our taxes. How about you? Go to work, our MPs. We beg you. Try and go there. That'll be all for tonight. I appreciate your company. Key points will be here at 7 a.m. tomorrow with Alfredo Kanse, and then I'll see you on Sunday with a conversation on the legislature. Listen, we'll bring up the issue of the absenteeism, so do join me then on Sunday at 2 p.m. for hot issues. Have a pleasant weekend in between that. I'm Kevin Yamana. Bye-bye.
Ghana Tonight is brought to you by Flamingo Paint. Superior durability, superior hiding, superior coverage, simply superior.